Na-haul-beak? Na-hul-book? You might not be able to pronounce it, but comedic dungeon crawler The Dungeon of Naheulbeuk. The Amulet of Chaos is a lot of fun to play. In 1985, Margaret Atwood released her dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale, about a near-future society in which a patriarchal and totalitarian group has overthrown the U.S. Developed by Artefacts Studio and out today on PS4, Xbox One and Switch, it combines tactical turn-based combat with adventuring and looting to great effect. Government and created a new nation called Gilead. More than 30 years later, the story was adapted for television. The series, also titled, The Handmaid's Tale, premiered on Hulu on April 26, 2017 and became an instant sensation. The story centers on a handmaid, June, Elisabeth Moss, known in Gilead only as Offred, referring to Offred, as she is technically owned by her commander, Fred Waterford. Gilead took over the U.S. It also packs in a lot of laughs along the way. Unlike your typical fantasy RPG, The Dungeon of Naheulbeuk doesn't take itself too seriously. Quite the opposite, in fact. With a cast of fully voiced characters, it's a game filled with quips, foul language and plenty of one-liners. It may make you groan from time to time, but it's a refreshing change from the serious life or death tone that many other games in the genre take. The Dungeon of Naheulbeuk first released on PC back in September 2020, so it's not brand new. But it has transferred over to console very nicely, with console controls being excellently implemented. Moving your party around, executing combat moves and navigating menus all feel easy and natural. It feels right at home on console, and for a genre that often stays PC only, that's refreshing. Playing the PS4 version of the game on a PS5 console, however, it's not been free of issues. In the midst of an infertility epidemic, when it was becoming more and more rare for women to carry their pregnancies to term. I've had a handful of crashes at random points of the game, and I've experienced a fair bit of screen tearing. It's not uncommon for PS4 games to experience some teething issues on PS5 consoles, however, so I'm optimistic these will get ironed out quickly. With the creation of Gilead, those who had recently proved themselves fertile, June had a child with her husband, Luke. Thanks to a robust autosave system, I've never lost any notable progress with a crash. It's just an irritation that the game could do without. Those technical issues aside, however, playing the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk is a lot of fun. Like any dungeon crawler, finding loot is always a joy. Your large party can be equipped with a variety of weapons and armor to improve their stats. Fagbenal, a few years prior, are forced to become handmaids. You'll also find coins, healing items that are useful in combat, and more. You've got a weight limit, though, so you'll have to keep an eye on what you're picking up and make sure you're not overburdened. But as fun as it is to find new items, the real joy of the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk is its combat. Battles are turn-based, with your heroes and their opponents each being able to move and perform an action each turn. Getting the edge over your opponent isn't always so straightforward, though. Move in and out of an enemy's attack range, for example, and they're able to make an opportunity strike at you. Or move into range of an archer's overwatch zone and you'll find yourself struck with an arrow. There's a lot of strategy involved, and your success depends solely on the careful planning of your party's attacks. As the assigned handmaid for the Waterford couple, June is forced to have sex with the commander in order to conceive and give birth to a child for the couple. The Handmaid's Tale was extremely well received upon its release, garnering multiple award nominations and wins. With each character in your party having a unique skill set, you'll want to make sure you're utilizing each of them well. Along with critical acclaim, the series has pulled in a massive audience, which has remained consistent throughout its 4 seasons. It was even renewed for a 5th season before the 4th had premiered, via Deadline. The series has a lot of fans, but even the die-hards may not know all the background information about the dystopian drama. Your thief, for example, isn't very hardy, but if he sneaks up behind a character he can deal formidable damage. For those who are curious, here is the untold truth of The Handmaid's Tale. Creator Bruce Miller was drawn to the story for decades. The series creator Bruce Miller is no stranger to writing for television. He's worked on a slew of popular TV shows such as Everwood, and The 100, but The Handmaid's Tale was the first show he created. As it turns out, Miller had been imagining this story on screen long before he was able to make it a reality. In an interview with the Dreamcage promoting the show's first season, Miller explained that he was assigned the book in college for a new fiction class and fell for it. And there's your ogre, who's dumb but tough at close range. You'll want to place your melee characters in whacking distance of your foes, but keep your ranged characters tucked away in cover. Finding the best positions on the playing field and using your team together is key to victory. What's perhaps most surprising about the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk is just how easy it is to pick up and play. Unlike other turn-based RPGs, it manages to be simple to learn but still packs in enough depth to feel like a real challenge. I loved the story. I was always a big fan of books that built the post-apocalyptic world. After school, I read it a couple of times over the years. A tutorial guides you through the basics early on, but you never feel like you're drowning in impenetrable information. There are several difficulty options available, so if you'd rather just enjoy the story without worrying about testing your skill in battle, you can do that. Margaret Atwood was really one of the people that taught me how to write and how to think like a writer. But if you like a challenge, whack the difficulty up, and enjoy some truly testing turn-based battles. As my career moved into TV, I thought, oh, this would make a great TV show. Explaining that he was fascinated by the thought of diving into all the details and hints given in the book, Miller saw the larger surrounding world as ripe for exploration. But more than anything, he was attracted to the characters Atwood had created. It all goes back to the people who live in this world and how they survive and how they're trapped by their own choices, he said. And believe me, if you're not prepared or not on your A-game, you'll be seeing that game over screen all too quickly. There's a lot to the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk. I wanted to tell the story about how these people lived through the experience and how they came out the other side alive and with some of their identity still intact. That was the thing I loved about the book, realizing by the end that Offred has kept herself alive. The Handmaid's Tale has been adapted for screen before, along with being adapted for the stage a handful of times, including at the Haymarket Theatre in the UK in 2002. The Handmaid's Tale was also adapted into a little-known film. The film of the same name came out in 1990, directed by Volker Schlondorf and starring Natasha Richardson as Offred, whose real name is Kate in this version, Faye Dunaway as Serena Joy, Robert Duvall as the commander and Victoria Tennant as Aunt Lydia. The film sticks to the events of the book fairly closely. The last act plays out a bit differently, much like the first season of the series does. But, unlike the series, the film was not well received. It has just a 32% tomatometer on Rotten Tomatoes. In comparison, the series as a whole has an 83%, with the first season alone having a 94% score. In a retrospective look back at the film, right around the time that the series was coming out, La Movie Buff summed up the consensus. Schlondorf's treatment as idly drab and antiseptic, indifferent almost, as though he felt Atwood's vision was cinematic enough. The set design is intricately detailed. The design team for The Handmaid's Tale don't let any space go to waste, making sure each room of the set is ripe with deeper meaning and messages. In a 2017 interview with Architectural Digest, production designer Julie Berghoff explained some of the meanings behind their set designs. For example, the commander's office, which Offred begins frequently visiting in Season 1, is filled with things that are off-limits to women: books, art, alcohol, works containing sexual content. In a similar vein, Offred's bedroom is also a reminder of the things she can't have, specifically, how her former life has been taken away from her. Berghoff explains, "We put a desk there, but she can't write. So it's almost like a remnant, a remembrance of, oh, I was a writer, an editor." While its turn-based combat encounters may be its main draw, there's plenty of exploring and adventuring to do, too. You'll need to use the skills of your thief to ensure you don't get unwittingly caught in a trap when you least expect it, or use the brute force of your ogre to knock down wooden doors, often leading to a stash of loot. Even following through the story, there's a great amount of content here, but if you choose to wander off the beaten path, you'll uncover even more. Hopefully the technical issues will be ironed out soon, but regardless, the Dungeon of Naheulbeuk is an adventure worth diving into. Even if you have no idea how to pronounce it. I can't even sit and write anymore. They don't want you to be vain anymore, so we basically put the shape of a mirror on the wall to make it feel like at one point there was a mirror there. The basis for Atwood's story isn't fiction. While Atwood's 1985 work is obviously a piece of fiction, many of the horrific details of the book are pulled from real-life examples of authoritarian treatment toward women. It's Na-haul-beak, apparently. In a 2017 interview with The Guardian, Atwood said, When it first came out, it was viewed as being far-fetched. However, when I wrote it, I was making sure I wasn't putting anything into it that human beings had not already done somewhere at some time. Stylist recently published a highly detailed article, delving into some of the historical terrors that Atwood pulled from. In reference to the enforced dress codes of the Handmaids of Gilead, it reads, "Religious clothing can and still is forced upon women by authorities and other, more conservative, communities. The Amish, for example, insist that women wear long dresses made of dark fabrics, and head coverings every single day. A more horrifying example is the enforced surrogacy for the sake of the most privileged getting to raise the children." The Stylist piece reads, "In Australia as recently as the 70s, Indigenous children were lawfully stolen from their homes and placed in religious institutions or fostered out to white families. From the end of World War II up until the late 70s, similar programs were carried out in the USA and Canada. Let's not forget the Magdalen laundries in Ireland, which saw young girls punished for their immorality, by being forced into slave-like conditions. The babies they bore were taken away from them and placed with adoptive families all over the world, with 2,000 alone being shipped across to the USA. Those are just a couple examples. The complete list by Stylist is terrifyingly long. The show attempted to make Gilead more diverse in the novel. All people of color have been forced out of Gilead, leaving only white central characters. Similarly, there aren't any LGBTQ characters in Atwood's novel. Anyone who has seen the series knows this isn't the case for the television version, a change Miller found vital. As he told Time magazine in 2017, "What's the difference between making a TV show about racists and making a racist TV show where you don't hire any actors of color?" Ironically, the ways in which the show deals with race is one of the biggest criticisms it faces. A 2017 Guardian article pointed out that what the handmaids go through is eerily similar to what black women went through on a daily basis during slavery, yet that parallel is ignored in the show. None of these details are the inventions of Atwood's imagination or embellishments from Miller's writer's room. This is what actually happened during 245 years of slavery in the U.S., albeit to black women rather than white ones, the article reads. Isn't it odd, then, to neither openly acknowledge this history, nor grapple with its legacy on screen? Vulture also addressed this issue in 2017, writing, "The show doesn't end up considering the racial dynamics of June's family, or what it means to be a handmaid of color. In reality, though, it's more concerned with the interiority of white women at the expense of people of color who recognize that Gilead isn't a possible horrifying future, but the reality of what America has always been." Moss forgoes makeup for the role. Moss has garnered a ton of attention for her stunning performance as June, a role which requires many close-ups on her face as she deals with hardship upon hardship. With each of these close-ups, June's current emotion, whether it be sorrow, rage or rarely, joy, is crystal clear. What also becomes clear to viewers with these close-ups is June's lack of makeup. Naturally, a handmaid wouldn't be allowed to wear it, as vanity is not an option for the handmaids. A character not wearing makeup isn't new for film or television, but it is rare for the actor to not be wearing any makeup. Minimal makeup is typically applied on the actor for filming purposes, even if to give the impression that no makeup is on the character. The Handmaid's Tale uses a much more natural approach, and Moss forgoes makeup for most scenes. If makeup is applied, it's typically to make Moss look more tired. As Moss told Yahoo Style in 2017, "If you're not sleeping a lot because you're working your butt, often you get dark circles and bags under your eyes. The more you have, the better. You're supposed to look stressed. In fact, one night I got sleep. I came in and my makeup artist was like, 'Oh dear,' and was disappointed that I didn't have the dark circles under my eyes that we needed." Moss memorized her voiceover dialogue. The Handmaid's Tale is a great example of how powerful voiceover can be when utilized well.
With June's voiceover, the audience is given an essential look into who she is as at her core, rather than the identity she is forced into as a handmaid. Discussing his surprise over how perfectly the voiceover worked for the scenes, Miller told Vulture in 2017, "We shot these bits of Lizzie just sitting in a room, quietly going through emotional phases, and when I watched it paired up with the voiceover, it worked perfectly. And I said, that's lucky. Except, it wasn't luck. It turns out that Moss had memorized all of her voiceover dialogue so that she could run it through her head while filming the scenes that the voiceover would match up with. Paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff that she memorized and walked through emotions while she was sitting there silently. Moss is a bit more modest about this feat. She told Vulture. It's a part of the script. Why wouldn't I memorize it? How else am I supposed to know what I'm thinking? I'm sitting there for 30 seconds. I have to be thinking about something. I just thought that was part of my job. The 2016 election impacted the show upon its debut. Many people viewed The Handmaid's Tale series as a response to the 2016 election, in which Donald Trump, an alleged rapist, amongst other things, was elected president. Not only has Trump been accused of rape and sexual assault, one of the many horrors the handmaids must suffer through, but many of his supporters believe in things such as abortion and other means of controlling women's bodies, the inspiration of the Handmaid's Tale novel, show and film. It's an intriguing connection, but also one that mostly is not true. The Hollywood Reporter pointed out in 2017 that much of the first season was completed before Trump was elected, making it one of the most unintentionally relevant shows in recent years. When the cast and crew returned for a second season, however, the general atmosphere was much different on set, and those election results were undeniably on some minds as perceived similarities presented themselves in the daily headlines. Samira Wiley, who plays Moira, another handmaid and close friend to June, spoke with Vanity Fair in 2017 about how the election impacted everyone. Coming back to the show, it was. Oh my gosh, we have an even bigger responsibility now. To have this show be excellent, have it have all the integrity it should have. The Handmaid's Tale broke an Emmy record at the 2017 Emmys. The Handmaid's Tale swept the night. Of their 13 nominations, the series won 8 of those, including 3 acting categories, for Moss, Ann Dowd and Alexis Bledel, directing, writing and production design, amongst others. The series also won the coveted Outstanding Drama Series, often the last award presented. With this win, the series became the first show from a streaming service to ever win the Outstanding Best Drama Emmy. With streaming services becoming more and more prominent, and continuing to produce award-worthy content, this record is one that could go down in the history books. Backstage after the show's win, Miller said, via Deadline, "The way that Hulu handled our show, they were bold and behind us and really committed to making something interesting. If the streaming services continue to do that, I don't see a limit to how many Emmys they can win." There's no plan for how many seasons The Handmaid's Tale will have. The first season of The Handmaid's Tale covers all of the events of the novel, so the second season alone was an unexpected delight for fans. Now, with season 5 on the way, Miller says he doesn't currently have an end date in sight. He recently told The Hollywood Reporter, "I certainly don't have a number of seasons in mind. I always thought I did, and that, I think, is a pandemic change. I thought I had a beginning, a middle and an end, and I still feel like I very much have an end. It's just that I'm finding more interesting paths along the way and more interesting things to do as we move towards more fascinating parts of the story." Miller continued on by declaring that there was another person vital in deciding how long the show would go on for. He said, "When I said that I'll do the show as long as Lizzie Moss wants to do it, that is born of the pandemic and born of the work she's done this year. She deserves to have me there writing for her as long as she wants. She earned that this year. I will write beautiful words for her to say for as long as she wants to say them." It's clear Miller is proud of the work he's done with The Handmaid's Tale, and is content with continuing to explore for as long as possible. In that aforementioned interview with the Dreamcage he did when the show first came out, he may have best summed up his mindset. "I've loved this story for 35 years, he said. I thought it was amazing and I am lucky and privileged to be part of it now.